Zhang Yi suddenly had a bold plan, which was to fill the entire subway tunnel with seawater to completely solve the zombie crisis and the rat problem. After escaping to the surface through the spatial portal, everyone felt a sense of relief. Zhang Yi joked, "I just wanted to leave you all a surprise." Zhang Yi has always been cautious about revealing his special abilities, even to his own teammates. It's not that he doesn't trust them, but revealing his cards too easily is not a wise move. At that moment, Zhang Yi said with a serious expression, "But at first, I really didn't think I could use this move. This zombie crisis is more complex and terrifying than I had anticipated. So far, I don't know how it will develop." The group listened with grave expressions. They knew that if it weren't for Zhang Yi's recent use of the spatial portal, they would have been buried underground. Uncle Yu said with a bewildered look, "So what should we do next? Based on what we saw underground, the number of zombies is unimaginable. There are at least hundreds of thousands, if not millions or more. If we can't solve this problem once and for all, we will face endless attacks from the zombie horde. There are also those copper-armored zombies that can fight Liang Yu to a draw. No one knows how many there will ultimately be. Not to mention, these zombies have a strong ability to learn." Zhang Yi fell silent. He lit a cigarette, took a deep drag, and after a long while, slowly exhaled. Everyone respected Zhang Yi's contemplation. Suddenly, Zhang Yi murmured softly, "We really can't delay dealing with these zombies anymore. Delaying even a day gives the zombies another day to grow." Zhang Yi looked into the distance, thoughtfully. To completely solve this trouble is actually not entirely impossible. Upon hearing this, everyone's eyes lit up. Zhang Yi continued, "I already have a plan in mind. It seems that most of the time, these zombies are in hibernation, which means even though the virus is extremely cold resistant, they don't want to stay outside all the time. There was a suggestion to blow up the subway tunnels, but the subway network in Heavenly Sea City is so vast and complex that there isn't enough explosives." Speaking of which, Zhang Yi squatted down and started sketching on the ground. "I now have a plan better than explosives, which is the only way we can control all the zombies and permanently seal them underground in a short time, and that is seawater. Although the coastal waters are completely frozen, the deep sea areas are not fully frozen due to the salt content and geothermal heat. If I can use my special space to extract a large amount of seawater and then fill the entire subway tunnel with it, the problem would be solved." Hearing this, Liang Yu clapped continuously in approval. "This strategy is brilliant." Excitedly, Liang Yu also began sketching on the ground. The subway tunnels are all interconnected and almost all on the same level. As long as we have enough seawater, we can flood the entire tunnel. By then, both the zombies and the rats will be dealt with. Even if a few manage to escape, they won't pose a threat. If the zombie king is carbon-based, it will probably be drowned half to death. Even if we can't kill them all, at least they will lose the tunnel as a place for survival and development. Suddenly, Chunlei also excitedly said, "Boss, your ability is like cheating." Uncle Yu also said with a grin, "I think the most impressive is Zhang Yi's brain. We are all people with special abilities, but only Zhang Yi can continually develop and utilize his powers." At this time, Flower couldn't help but excitedly meow. Zhang Yi slowly stood up. "Before we actually implement it, this is just a bold hypothesis. Everyone should hurry back first. I have some technical questions to ask Xinxin and Karen. This matter cannot be delayed any longer. It must be done as soon as possible. We can't give the zombies any more time to grow." After returning to the shelter, Jo Kier immediately came forward to greet them but noticed that everyone's expression seemed a bit downcast, and she quickly realized that the operation must not have gone very smoothly. Jo Kier thoughtfully made a cup of Zhang Yi's favorite coffee and brought it over, asking with concern, "Brother Zhang Yi, did something troublesome happen during the operation?" Zhang Yi forced a smile and said, "A little trouble, but it's not a big problem." Zhang Yi didn't want to bring any negative issues to the women at home, as it was not something they needed to worry about. Shortly after, Yang Xinxin and Lu Karen also arrived in the living room. Yang Xinxin immediately sensed the atmosphere, and Zhang Yi directly waved them over. "Come here, I just have something to ask you too. I have a bold plan and want to ask about its feasibility. I need a way to rapidly freeze the unfrozen seawater, and in a very large amount." Zhang Yi thought that even if the entire subway was flooded, many zombies and giant rats might still have a chance to escape. So, if it can be rapidly frozen at the same time, the entire subway tunnel would become a block of ice. In that case, ordinary zombies and giant rats definitely wouldn't be able to escape. Lu Karen pondered for a moment and said, "There is definitely a way. We just need some special chemical materials." "How much do we need?" Zhang Yi couldn't help but laugh. "A huge amount. I plan to fill the entire subway tunnel." Hearing this, the women were shocked. This was beyond their imagination. Lu Karen pondered and said, "Actually, it's not difficult, as long as we have enough materials." Zhang Yi's eyes lit up. "As long as it can be done, materials aren't a problem. I have plenty of time to find them." Lu Karen excitedly said, "We previously collected a lot of coagulant materials at the chemical plant, and they can just come in handy now. The experiment is simply about using a catalyst to precipitate the salt from the seawater, which is trivial for me." Hearing this, Zhang Yi excitedly slapped his thigh. "In that case, we'll head out to collect seawater this afternoon." Meanwhile, at the Radiant Prosperity base, Xiao Honglian sat in front of the computer with a grim expression. Just a moment ago, the search team they had sent out had been completely wiped out. The computer was playing the scene transmitted by Dong Hu just before his death. Xiao Honglian watched the terrifying number of zombies, and those rats larger than dogs. But what shocked and daunted her the most were the giant bamboo-like copper-armored zombies. Their combat strength was on par with mutated humans. Upon seeing this, Zhuge Qingting broke out in a cold sweat. How did these monsters come to be? If they rush to our base, we simply don't have the capability to withstand them. Boss, should we consider retreating to the underground shelter? Xiao Honglian frowned and firmly said, that's absolutely impossible. The refinery is our lifeblood. No matter what, we have to defend it even if it means fighting to the death. Zhuge Qingting said, it's better to preserve the green hills than to burn all the wood. If they all come attacking, we will all undoubtedly die. Xiao Honglian's eyes flashed fiercely. If they dare to come, we'll pour out our stockpiled oil. We might as well destroy everything if it comes to that. Zhuge Qingting said, this is indeed like cutting off a limb to save the body, but it is indeed a good defensive measure. Let's move the families of the upper echelons into the underground shelter first, so that even if it comes to the worst, we can quickly retreat underground. Xiao Honglian leaned back in her chair and took a deep breath. Let's do that. Get on it right away. After confirming the feasibility of the seawater backfilling plan, Zhang Yi decided to set off immediately. He then drove the snow vehicle toward the East Sea. They soon arrived at the original coastline, but now the nearshore waters were enveloped in ice. They continued toward the deeper sea, where the ice-covered sea surface was like a blue mirror, incredibly flat and pristine. Liang Yu couldn't help but exclaim, this is too beautiful. Is this the masterpiece of nature? Uncle Yu also couldn't help but say, even the original North and South poles must have been like this. Zhang Yi threw cold water on the conversation. Those who want to enjoy the scenery can get off the vehicle. Our task now is to find seawater that isn't frozen. After driving for 2 hours, Chun-Lei suddenly shouted, boss, I think I see waves. Zhang Yi finally breathed a sigh of relief. Everyone, hurry up, but also stay on alert in case of traps from unknown forces. Let's collect the water and leave quickly. Zhang Yi parked the snow vehicle near the ice, then carefully walked to the edge of the water and shouted, double doors. 2 huge dimensional gates suddenly appeared above the seawater, the gates acting like a giant pump, beginning to massively suck seawater into the alternate space. This process was somewhat tedious and boring. Uncle Yu rubbed his hands, regretting, if only we had brought a fishing rod. It would be so cool to fish here. This thought wasn't unique to Uncle Yu. Even Zhang Yi felt tempted to take a fishing rod from the alternate space and enjoy some fishing. At this moment, Zhang Yi had an idea. Let's set up a fish pond when we get back, and then raise some sea fish. There are quite a few sea fish in the water we're collecting now, so it would be perfect for raising and fishing. Uncle Yu and Chun-Lei both cheered in agreement. Indeed, no man could resist the joy of being a fisherman, and neither could the secondary apes. Chun-Lei even suggested, boss, let's consider building a seaside house here. With my abilities, I could build another Su family town in a few days. Chun-Lei even fantasized, perhaps after the Morning Dew base is destroyed by the zombie horde, we can take over their big ship and then go on a long sea voyage. Zhang Yi laughed. Let's focus on solving the current problem first, but those ocean-going ships at the Morning Dew base are indeed tempting. Going to sea is indeed a huge temptation for Zhang Yi, much better than being stuck in a shelter all day. Zhang Yi collected for 2 hours and only stopped when the alternate space was almost full. Zhang Yi turned and walked towards the snow vehicle, saying, let's hurry back and see how Karen's materials are coming along. The group prepared to board the vehicle, laughing and talking, unaware that just beneath the ice where they had just stopped, a huge shadow slowly swam past. No one noticed this. In the vast ocean, how many terrifying creatures exist is unknown, and what mutations might occur is unimaginable. Soon, the group returned to the shelter. Lu Karen had not rested for a moment in the workshop, even skipping dinner. As soon as Zhang Yi returned, he went to the workshop and told Lu Karen, I've collected enough seawater. How are your materials coming along? As he spoke, she showed Zhang Yi her day's work. Hundreds of plastic barrels contained the precipitant she had prepared, which could rapidly precipitate the salt from the seawater. As the salinity decreased, the seawater could freeze quickly at this temperature. Zhang Yi nodded and asked, based on your estimates, how long will it take to completely precipitate the seawater? Lu Karen gestured with her fingers and said, I need at least 2 days to prepare enough quantity. Zhang Yi was not in a hurry and said, just 2 days. We can wait that long. Upon waking up, Zhang Yi discovered that the shelter was surrounded by tens of thousands of giant rats. The frantic gnawing noise was extremely irritating, and the voice system also alerted, alarm, alarm, the shelter is under attack. Current damage level 0.00001%. The attack is ongoing. Please monitor the damage situation. The dense claws of the rat horde were frantically scraping at the walls and windows, and their claws and teeth were exceptionally sharp. Zhang Yi felt a tingling in his scalp. Though the shelter's defenses were currently holding up, it was nearly impossible for the giant rats to bite through the shelter in the short term, but they did impact the defenses. Constant dripping wears away the stone. Over the years, they could likely really gnaw a big hole in the shelter. Even if they couldn't break through, they could severely damage the outer walls. The scale of the zombie and rat horde attack was several times larger larger than before. It seems the Zombie King was really enraged. This could also be a warning from the Zombie King. Their underground zombie horde is large enough that as long as the zombies sent are not completely wiped out, they can return battle intelligence to the Zombie King. Over time, the Zombie King will become smarter, and the zombie horde's combat strength will also become stronger. But Zhang Yi couldn't care less about that now. He couldn't let the zombies and rat horde show off their power. Since the seawater backfilling plan still had 2 days, they decided to go on a killing spree for these 2 days. The 4 people and 1 cat once again armed themselves fully and rushed out of the shelter, starting a frenzied clearance. Playing home games brought them no pressure. In just half an hour, the zombie and rat horde were wiped out, and the remaining zombies scattered as usual, fleeing in all directions towards the next channel garden station. Zhang Yi looked at the exterminated rat horde and then at the shelter's outer walls, and said worriedly, if we let these giant rats continue attacking, the shelter might be gnawed through in at most 2 years. Zhang Yi told everyone, let's head back for now and prepare well. In 2 days, we'll drown them all. The situation for Zhang Yi was relatively good. The other forces had it much worse. Morning Dew Base even abandoned the port, directly hiding in the giant ships at sea. Wei Dinghai knew that the port was just a temporary landing spot. Although abandoning the port meant losing a lot of container supplies, the giant ships were their foundation for long-term survival and development. Moreover, Wei Dinghai also noticed that the zombie horde was continuously evolving, eventually displaying a military-like discipline. Wei Dinghai secretly felt fortunate that they could hide on the giant ships to avoid attacks, unlike other forces that didn't have such an advantage. The scenes at their locations must be quite brutal. Indeed, the most brutal would probably be the Snow Worship sect. They hardly have any defenses against zombies, and are almost always engaged in close combat. Luckily, they have a large enough base population that, although many followers die each time, the remaining members can still maintain a certain scale. For the Snow Worship sect, the addition of giant rats also brought a huge benefit, as these rats, larger than small pigs, undoubtedly became a delicacy for them. At this point, no one would care about viruses or not. 2 days quickly passed, and the seawater in Zhang Yi's alternate space had completed basic precipitation. Although it was still a bit away from being freshwater, the freezing speed had significantly increased. Everything was ready. With that, Zhang Yi took his combat team and embarked on their journey to the frozen subway stations. After getting everything ready, Zhang Yi first arrived at the terminal station of Next Channel Garden Station, Song Village Station, because he knew that was the key. To completely freeze the zombies and rat hordes in the subway, the first step was to block all their escape routes. Therefore, Zhang Yi planned to blow up Song Village Station. Just blowing up a subway station didn't require a large amount of explosives. After setting up the explosives, Zhang Yi immediately detonated them. With a loud boom, the thick ice and snow on the ground instantly collapsed. At that moment, Chun Lei said worriedly, "Boss, we're making such a big commotion. What if the Zombie King senses the danger and flees early?" Zhang Yi dismissively said, "My goal has never been to kill the Zombie King. As long as we can drive them away and stop them from threatening my shelter, that's enough. As long as they are far from my shelter, I don't care about their life or death." Lian Yu, frowning with concern, "But what if the zombies wipe out all the forces and even occupy the entire Heavenly Sea City? Do you think we can still remain unaffected?" Zhang Yi laughed. "You're thinking too much. I just want to protect myself. I don't have that much sense of responsibility. Think about it. If the zombies occupy the entire Heavenly Sea City, then soon the entire blue planet could be swept by the virus. Do you think just a few of us can stop all this? If wealthy, help the world. If poor, keep yourself intact. I just want to be the latter. We don't have the power to handle everything. Don't aim too high. Just manage ourselves." Afterward, they arrived at Next Channel Garden Station, and Zhang Yi immediately opened the dimensional gate. A massive amount of seawater gushed out, furiously flowing along the narrow tunnel. At this rate, it would take about 2 hours to fill the entire subway tunnel. The giant rats quickly sensed the danger and frantically scurried through the tunnel, while most of the zombies were still in a dormant state and were submerged by the water before they could react. The surging water immediately scattered the gathered zombie hordes. Zhang Yi released all of the coagulant that Lu Karen had made. In an instant, the seawater began to freeze at a visible rate, and the ice rapidly spread deeper. Those zombies and rats that were attempting to struggle were quickly solidified. After dumping everything, Zhang Yi breathed a sigh of relief. The zombie crisis was finally temporarily resolved. Even if they weren't completely eliminated, they likely wouldn't be attacking the shelter again anytime soon. As for the other forces, they would have to fend for themselves. Uncle Yu, witnessing this, couldn't help but remark, "Zhang Yi's spatial ability is truly invincible." Chun Lei also couldn't help but praise, "The internet does not deceive me. Time is honored. Space is king. Destiny does not go out. Causality is emperor. Isn't that just our boss?" At that moment, Liang Yu asked, "So what's our plan next?" Zhang Yi chuckled coldly. "Of course, to follow up with a victory. Although the entire subway tunnel has been sealed with ice, there will definitely be some stragglers coming out from various stations. Any that could escape would be among the stronger ones. Whether zombies or rats, we should eliminate these threats. After all, since we're here, we can't just flood the place and go home. We'll clean up each subway station along the line, kill whatever we can at next channel garden station, and then we can go home. Everyone naturally had no objections, as this time it was all Zhang Yi taking action. They just watched from the side, neither physically nor mentally strained. Not long after starting, they indeed found a number of zombies and giant rats at a station, and without a doubt, they were all shattered by the group. Meanwhile, in a snowy field on the outskirts, 4 copper-armored zombies crawled out of the subway. They closely clustered around a creature resembling a white ape. It had a somewhat human shape, covered with long white fur. It was hard to imagine that this unremarkable-looking creature, seemingly not very powerful, was actually the zombie king commanding the entire subway tunnel. At this moment, it looked furious, as its task was to cultivate a zombie horde in this location and eventually kill all the humans in a nearby shelter once the horde had grown large enough. But now, the painstakingly cultivated horde was nearly completely annihilated, and the remaining zombies could no longer pose a threat to the shelter. The zombie king was contemplating strategies while the 4 copper-armored zombies tightly guarded it. Just then, as if receiving some signal, the zombie king made a decision. Subsequently, the zombie king, accompanied by 4 copper-armored zombies, slowly walked northward step by step. Meanwhile, at Radiant Prosperity Base, facing the continuous attacks of zombies, Xiao Holian reluctantly chose to make a drastic decision. She dug a deep trench around the base, and whenever a horde of zombies or rats attacked, she would ignite the crude oil in the trench. Each fire would kill many of the zombies and rats. After all, as it stands, fire remains the best method to combat them. For Radiant Prosperity Base, it merely meant losing some crude oil, but they have an abundance of this resource at the moment, so there is no immediate concern. Over at Emerald Waterside Base, the situation was also grim. Although the workers, under the enhancement of Xing Tian's abilities, could become warriors capable of taking on 10 enemies each, they could not withstand the endless assaults of zombies. After losing several hundred brothers, Xing Tian also reluctantly chose to retreat to the underground shelter. He believed that the zombies were only interested in living beings and would likely not damage the equipment. They would hide underground for a while, waiting for the zombies to disappear before emerging. The shelter's defense level is very high, so it is impossible for even a large number of zombies to threaten it underground. On this point, Xing Tian had consulted Zhang Yi, who agreed with Xing Tian's approach. Engaging in a death struggle with the zombies would be futile. Protecting their own viable forces was most important. Meanwhile, back at the shelter, after clearing the zombies from next channel garden station, there had been no zombie waves or rat hordes for over 10 days. Suddenly, Yang Xinxin rushed over holding a laptop. I received a mysterious email. Brother Zhang Yi, please make sure to check it. Zhang Yi looked shocked. It's been so long since the apocalypse started. Who is still sending emails? Upon opening it, the email read, River South Domain Special Envoy has reached Heavenly Sea City, cordially inviting you to a meeting at 2:30 p.m. at Heavenly Sea City Central Building. The invited list included leaders of the 4 major forces and the unranked Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi's eyes widened in surprise. It was indeed River South Domain, the strongest among the 5 military regions. Recall that the reason Zhang Yi was able to defeat West Mountain Base previously, despite being the underdog, was largely due to a missile from River South Domain. It's no exaggeration to say that if River South Domain wished, they could erase Heavenly Sea City from the map with a flick of their fingers. For this, Zhang Yi had to maintain a sense of awe. However, Zhang Yi still said skeptically, could this be a prank by someone or a trap set by some force? Yang Xinxin shook her head seriously. I can assure you, this email is 100% from River South Domain. Due to my encrypted firewall, anyone wanting to contact me must go through my approval. Without my permission, no one could send an email directly to my inbox. This email bypassed my surface firewall and went straight into my inbox. The sender must be from River South Domain. There are only 2 possibilities for breaking through my defenses. One is a hacker more skilled than me, and the other is a state agency with supreme authority. I can confidently tell you that although I dare not claim there are no hackers in the country stronger than me, it is absolutely impossible for anyone to break through my network so quickly without my noticing. So, there is no need to doubt this. The only question is why they suddenly came to our Heavenly Sea City. I think it's very likely related to the zombie crisis. Hearing this, Zhang Yi still asked anxiously, if a national agency can easily break through our network, doesn't that mean our shelter's network isn't secure? Yang Xinxin smiled dismissively. That's not the right interpretation. The core network controlling the shelter is an intranet, using an independent server. It's like, no matter how skilled a hacker is, they can't break into a computer that isn't connected to the internet. Relieved by this explanation, Zhang Yi analyzed, they're likely here to investigate the zombie tide. After all, the scale of the zombie tides is growing, and if left unchecked, the consequences are unimaginable. It could quickly spread to other cities and eventually turn into an uncontrollable disaster. Yang Xinxin nodded. From the email, it's clear they are very aware of the power dynamics in Heavenly Sea City, hence the precise invitation to each leader. I think we must attend this meeting, as there's no need to offend a major military region unnecessarily. Zhang Yi, looking lazily at the ceiling, thought aloud, given the network capabilities of the other forces, it's unlikely to be a trap set by them. But if we do go, we should prepare for the worst. Zhang Yi wasn't too worried. With his current strength, even if he couldn't win a direct fight, escaping unscathed wouldn't be a problem. Zhang Yi called everyone to the living room, and Chun Lei, after listening, frowned worriedly. We just drove off the zombies, haven't had a few days of peace yet, and now River South Domain shows up. Zhang Yi shook his head nonchalantly. Don't be too nervous. They're not here to loot resources. Although Heavenly Sea City is a developed coastal city, to River South Domain, the material reserves here are insignificant. Even the supplies in my Walmart warehouse aren't that important to them. After all, River South has always been the richest urban agglomeration, and materials are not a problem for them. Chun Lei was somewhat reassured, having just enjoyed a few days of peace. He didn't want any factors to change the situation. Then Uncle Yu said, I think they don't mean any harm. I think we should trust them. As the regional leader, River South Domain definitely doesn't want to see their territory ravaged by zombies. Having them handle this situation isn't a bad thing at all. Liang Yu also agreed with this view. With the zombie crisis spreading, although our shelter hasn't been affected yet, no one can guarantee what might happen later. Now that a higher authority is stepping in to solve this, that's obviously a good thing. Zhang Yi nodded and said, since they've specifically mentioned my name, I definitely need to go. He then turned to Yan Xinxin. Xinxin, continue to maintain our network security. Although we can almost confirm their identity, we can't completely rule out the possibility of a trap. Everyone, have a good lunch today. We'll meet them on time at 2:30 p.m. at the Central Building. At that moment, at Heavenly Sea City Central Building, a custom snow vehicle arrived. The once grand Central Building was now half buried in snow, with thick snow covering the exposed half above ground. At that moment, a long-haired man, seeing this scene, couldn't help but lament, what has happened here? We have a meeting soon, and this mess doesn't look good. Wu Di walked over and smiled. No problem, let me clean it up. Saying this, he struck forward with his palm, releasing a golden energy wave that instantly blasted a large hole through the snow. After doing this, Wu Di walked up to Bian Junwu and respectfully said, Captain, please go ahead. Bian Junwu, expressionless, silently led the way into the building. Following close behind were the Deputy Captain Bailey Changqing, Wu Di, and two virus experts. Each of their strengths was among the top echelon of the major forces, especially the captain, Bian Junwu. After receiving the email, the various forces did not dare to delay. The first to arrive were the people from Radiant Prosperity Base, with Xiao Holian leading a fully armed group while Zhuge Qingting stayed behind to guard the base. When they reached the central building, the distinctive snow vehicle caught her eye. It seems that the region has sent only a few people. Xiao Holian was well aware of the severity of the zombie tide and had witnessed the terrifying scenes beneath the subway. Now that their oil reserves were dwindling, it was naturally a good thing for the region to send people to address this issue at this time. Even if it was a trap, she had no choice but to take the risk. Looking at the icy pathway that stretched tens of meters in front of the building, Xiao Holian murmured under her breath, this doesn't look like it was dug out by machines. It looks more like it was punched through. Clearly, this was the work of a mutant. As one of the top mutants in Heavenly Sea City, she knew well how powerful such a move was. It seems we have some experts inside. Xiao Holian led her group towards the building. As they approached, Wu Di came out and blocked them, saying, state your origins first. He stood with his arms akimbo, his tone carrying a slight air of condescension. The soldiers behind her felt an urge to rush up and punch him, but Xiao Holian, frowning, responded, we are from Radiant Prosperity Shelter, and I am Xiao Holian, the leader of Radiant Prosperity Base. Hearing this, Wu Di's tone softened considerably. Ah, the squad leader of the Heavenly Sea City Criminal Police Squad. Welcome. Xiao Holian naturally found this flattering, but she also picked up on the underlying message. They knew all about her, and they were well prepared. Wu Di stepped aside and said, please come in, but only you may enter. Xiao Holian understood such arrangements, so she didn't refuse. She instructed her soldiers, wait for me outside. At that moment, a captain-level mutant stepped forward and whispered, boss, be careful, they might be deceiving us. Hearing this, Xiao Holian cleared her throat, then confidently turned back and declared, even if there's deceit, nobody can keep me here if I decide to leave. This statement served both to warn Wu Di and to assert her authority in front of her subordinates. In the eyes of everyone at Radiant Prosperity Base, Xiao Holian was undoubtedly a formidable force. However, as she made this remark, they did not notice the dismissive look on Wu Di's face. Shortly after Xiao Holian's arrival, Wei Dinghai from Morning Dew Base also arrived. Since they were now hiding on the giant ships, he also brought his strongest deputy, Qin Jingwan. However, Wu Di also blocked them, allowing only Wei Dinghai to enter. Qin Jingwan was displeased at this. What are you acting high and mighty for? Who knows what tricks you're playing inside? Letting one more person in won't eat you. Wu Di maintained an arrogant demeanor throughout. Qin Jingwan, considering himself among the top tier in Heavenly Sea City, naturally wouldn't stand for this. He thought to himself, although you represent River South Domain, this is Heavenly Sea City, and no one should be ordering us around just because they showed up. But Wu Di didn't indulge him, mockingly saying, we only negotiate with the leaders of the major forces. Are you the boss of Morning Dew Base? Qin Jingwan was visibly embarrassed. Wei Dinghai laughed and said, since we are all here to solve problems, problems. It's okay for me to go in alone. He then patted Chen Jingwan on the shoulder, saying, "You wait here." He also whispered a warning to Chen Jingwan. "This guy is not to be underestimated. You're no match for him." Chen Jingwan could only nod reluctantly. In this icy and snowy environment, Wei Dinghai's Ice Lord ability was extremely powerful, capable of offense and defense, advance and retreat. Even if he went in alone, he would be without burden, especially since Xiao Holian had already entered. He certainly could not show weakness. Despite feeling somewhat humiliated, Chen Jingwan could only pretend not to hear anything and stood aside. This scene made the soldiers at the entrance from Radiant Prosperity base burst into laughter. Soon, Zhang Yi's snow vehicle also arrived at the location. Seeing that people from Radiant Prosperity and Morning Dew were already present, Zhang Yi immediately pulled out a handgun as he stepped out of the vehicle, instantly heightening the tension at the scene. Everyone had witnessed the terrifying strength of Zhang Yi's team during the previous battles between the 5 armies. Despite their deep resentment, they involuntarily took a few steps back, making way for them. Zhang Yi and his group swaggered towards the entrance, well aware that if Zhang Yi wished, he could potentially kill them instantly. Seeing Zhang Yi approach, Wu Di shouted out to him, "You must be Zhang Yi. Only you can come in, everyone else must stay outside." Zhang Yi spread his hands and said, "No problem." Having seen that people from the 2 major bases were kept outside when he got off the vehicle, Zhang Yi knew this arrangement was to be expected. Wu Di seemed quite interested in Zhang Yi, his gaze barely leaving him. Upon reaching the meeting room, Zhang Yi immediately took the seat at the forefront. Looking at the middle-aged man in the gray coat wearing sunglasses in such dim indoor lighting, Zhang Yi thought amusedly, wearing sunglasses indoors, is he blind? After sitting down, Zhang Yi introduced himself. "I am Zhang Yi. May I ask who you are?" Responding to Zhang Yi's familiarity, Bian Junwu dropped his guard and said, "I am Bian Junwu, the person appointed by River South Domain to investigate the zombie tide." Zhang Yi did not move to shake his hand, merely responding with a somewhat goofy smile. "So you're Mr. Bian. I've heard a lot about you." Just then, the meeting room door was pushed open again, and Xing Tian walked in grinning, taking a seat next to Zhang Yi, saying, "We're from Emerald Waterside, a bit far so we were delayed on the road. My apologies." Xing Tian sat down and started chatting with Zhang Yi. "Old classmate, how's it been on your side lately? Those indestructible zombies and giant rats sure have been giving us a tough time." Zhang Yi frowned and said, "Same for us. They harass us every day. I'm almost annoyed to death." Sighing deeply, Zhang Yi added, "If this keeps up, I'm afraid my shelter won't hold much longer." Hearing this, the leaders of the 3 major bases flashed a hint of pleasure in their eyes. So everyone's having a tough time. This made them feel a bit more balanced. The representative from Snow Worship Sect, Jing Yishen, was the last to arrive. Yuan Yekong, still maintaining her aura of mystery, was not unexpected to everyone. It was said that Yuan Yekong, a young woman in her 20s, probably couldn't match the high priest Jing Yishen in management ability or authority, and might even have been sidelined as a puppet internally. Jing Yishen politely greeted Bian Junwu. Seeing that everyone had arrived, Bian Junwu rolled up his sleeves, looked at his watch, and said, "Very good, everyone is punctual." He then surveyed the attendees with a serious expression and stated, "A severe zombie crisis has broken out in Heavenly Sea City. As local powers, you bear an inescapable responsibility. Don't you remember the original purpose of establishing these shelters? I won't mention the Snow Worship Sect, but you 4 have either occupied the nation's shelters or seized their resources. The existence of city shelters is meant to maintain stability in times of crisis. You hold the most advantageous resources yet fail to fulfill your duties, which is a betrayal of the entire city." At that moment, Wei Dinghai said, "Mr. Bian, you shouldn't talk without understanding our situation. Do you think we don't want to maintain the stability of Heavenly Sea City? With the sudden zombie horde this time, the little power we have can't possibly withstand their attack, let alone resolve it. We don't have powerful weapons or the elite troops like River South Domain. We can only manage to protect ourselves." Hearing this, Bian Jun was suddenly burst into laughter and said, "Stop making excuses for your incompetence. Since you admit you lack the capability to handle this crisis, from now on, you'll simply have to follow my orders. I will take command of this zombie crisis, and you must cooperate unconditionally." As these words were spoken, the expressions on everyone's faces changed dramatically. Even Zhang Yi couldn't help but feel tense. The idea of unconditionally obeying someone else's commands was unthinkable. He would never leave his fate in the hands of others. Jing Yishan hastily said, "Your request is something our Snow Worship Sect might not be able to comply with." Xing Tian also said, "At this point, as the supervising authority River South Domain, I've only sent a few of you here, yet you want to command everyone. What do you think we are? Your cattle?" Xiao Holian added, "Unless you send a large force to support us, forget about it." The leaders of the various forces naturally weren't fools. They wouldn't easily relinquish their authority, especially since only 5 of them had come, and their actual strength wasn't even clear yet. Bian Jun was sneered, "So you're saying I'm not qualified? You don't have the strength to solve it yourself, and you don't want me to lead, so you don't want to solve this zombie crisis at all?" Bian Junwu slammed the table hard and said, "Don't forget, the shelters don't belong to you personally. River South Domain can reclaim them anytime we wish." Bian Junwu continued sternly, "You can't even protect Heavenly Sea City properly, and now Now the zombie crisis is starting to affect surrounding cities, yet you still cling to your insignificant power. Bien Junwo banged the table hard again and shouted, "Don't forget, Heavenly Sea City doesn't belong to just a few of you. River South Domain still exists, and the ultimate command center for all territories in the River South region still belongs to River South Domain." Bien Junwo stood up from his chair, his demeanor exuding a fierce military air, down on them and said, "You need to understand, now is not the time to fight for power and profit. It's time to unite and face this crisis together. I am here representing River South Domain, and what I say represents the will of River South Domain. You indeed have the right to disobey, as long as you can bear the consequences." Zhang Yi frowned and didn't want to say anything. After all, there were only a few of them, and even if they handed over command, it wouldn't be a significant loss, just a loss of some initiative. At this point, Xiao Holian scoffed, "Do you think we're scared? If we disobey, are you prepared to send troops to wipe us out?" Bien Junwo looked at Xiao Holian and said, "It seems you haven't realized the severity of this crisis. Let me tell you the truth. The higher-ups have given me two orders. The first is obviously to successfully cooperate with local forces to resolve the zombie crisis, to prevent the situation from worsening and spreading to other cities. The second, you need to listen carefully. If the situation becomes uncontrollable." Bien Junwo stopped abruptly, then slowly sat back down and said, "We can abandon the entire Heavenly Sea City. It's just a matter of a few missiles. River South Domain has the capability." Hearing this, Zhang Yi swallowed hard, his expression extremely grave. He had considered such a scenario too, where if the zombie crisis threatened to expand outward, directly sacrificing Heavenly Sea City would indeed be River South Domain's best option. Such an outcome would be catastrophic for Zhang Yi. The others obviously understood this as well. Destroying them was just a matter of pushing a few buttons for River South Domain, ridiculously easy. Suddenly, everyone fell silent. Even the fiery Xiao Holian dared not object any further. Bien Junwo continued, "Since that's the case, from now on, all local forces must unconditionally obey my command." The looks on their faces were complex, but at the moment, they truly had no standing to challenge River South Domain. Zhang Yi spoke up, "Our team will support your actions unconditionally, but as you just said, you had to intervene because our local strength was insufficient to resolve the zombie crisis. But what if we can resolve it ourselves? In that case, we wouldn't need to trouble you." This statement left everyone astonished. Xiao Holian even scoffed disdainfully. "What are you bragging about at a time like this? Don't tell me that just with the few people in your shelter, you can handle such a large horde of zombies and rats. Young man, don't get ahead of yourself." Wei Dinghai also said with a hint of sarcasm, "Young man, don't make promises you can't keep. Even bragging should consider the consequences." Even Xing Tian said to Zhang Yi, "Didn't you just say you were overwhelmed and your shelter could barely hold on? Don't just put on a brave face and suffer in silence. It's better to follow Mr. Bien's plans." Hearing this, Zhang Yi was completely unfazed. He lazily said, "At this point, do you really think I would joke with you? If you don't believe it, you can go and see for yourself. In the area around our shelter, the crisis with the zombies and giant rats has already been resolved." Everyone's faces were filled with astonishment. Seeing Zhang Yi's confident demeanor, it really didn't seem like he was joking. Could it be that while they were fighting zombies in life-or-death struggles, Zhang Yi was leisurely watching the show? At this moment, the expressions on the faces of the leaders of the major forces were probably uglier than if they had eaten cockroaches. Xiao Holian, infuriated, slammed the table and stared fiercely at Zhang Yi, saying, "Who are you trying to fool? How could your ragtag group possibly achieve that?" Zhang Yi remained completely calm and composed as he responded, "Don't believe me? You're welcome to go and investigate for yourself." Bien Junwo then spoke up, "Brother Zhang Yi, tell us in detail how you did it." The others also looked eagerly at Zhang Yi. Although they felt immense resentment, they were also desperate for a means to deal with the zombie hordes. If they could glean some experience from Zhang Yi, that would be ideal. Zhang Yi, hands on his hips, seriously said, "The zombies' food is humans, so they naturally gather where there are living people. Nowadays, aren't the major bases your headquarters, where people in Heavenly Sea City are concentrated? My shelter only has a few people, and since we are located in the suburbs, we didn't attract many zombies. However, our battles with them were extremely fierce. I discovered that these zombies must be commanded by a zombie king, who has some intelligence and can continually improve the zombies' combat tactics. At the same time, the zombie king can continuously produce new zombies. So, we decided that we had to penetrate the zombies' lair and kill the zombie king, which would solve the problem once and for all. The giant rats were an unexpected problem, but fortunately, the rats have a symbiotic relationship with the zombies. Once the zombies were eliminated, the rats' threat dissolved. Later, our team risked our lives to sneak into the subway tunnels, armed with various weapons scavenged from West Mountain Base, and after 3 days and nights of bloody combat, we barely managed to kill the zombie king. Ultimately, my area achieved temporary stability. Zhang Yi's account was truthful, but he concealed his true methods of clearing the zombie hordes. After all, once he revealed his tactics, Bien Junwo might pressure him, eventually turning him into a subordinate for others. Bien Junwo thought to himself, it seems this Zhang Yi, with just a few people, really has some capabilities, having resolved the zombie crisis earliest. Then Zhang Yi spoke up. Currently, Heron's River District District and West Mountain District are under my control, and everything is stable there. According to what you said, if we are able to maintain stability on our own, then shouldn't we be granted some degree of autonomy? Zhang Yi added, of course, we are also very willing to cooperate with the investigation team. Whenever there's a need for us, we will do our utmost. However, we only wish to manage the affairs within our territory. After all, as everyone knows, our entire team is just a few people. With these words, Zhang Yi clearly delineated his boundaries with the major forces, but also gave Bian Junwu enough respect. Bian Junwu nodded in satisfaction and said, your team has done very well. I can accept your proposal. However, if there comes a time when we need your help, I hope you will cooperate. Zhang Yi smiled and said, of course, solving the zombie crisis is everyone's responsibility. In fact, Zhang Yi also didn't want Heavenly Sea City to be completely obliterated. Assisting Bian Junwu in dealing with the zombies and rats without losing autonomy was only logical. Bian Junwu nodded. From that moment, Zhang Yi's role underwent a significant change. He shifted from a mere follower to a collaborator. Bian Junwu, placing his hands firmly on the table, said seriously, now we can start planning. First, we need to share all the data you have on hand. Most importantly, I don't care what past grudges you've had. Now you must all unconditionally set them aside. After the leaders tacitly accepted Bian Junwu's leadership, Jing Yixin spoke up. So, Mr. Bian, should we start drafting specific battle strategies now? As the Snow Worship sect had suffered the most severe losses during this crisis, resolving the zombie and rat menace was urgent. By now, nearly half of their followers had died. If they continued to sustain such losses, the foundations of the Snow Worship sect could soon crumble. But just then, a commotion arose downstairs. Looking through the window, it turned out that Chen Jingwan was arguing with the investigation team. He pointed at Wu Di's nose and yelled, what are you pretending for? If you really have the guts, fight me. Wei Dinghai frowned, recognizing the voice of his deputy, Chen Jingwan. Bian Junwu also noticed the change in Wei Dinghai's expression and asked, is the person shouting downstairs one of your men? At this moment, Xing Tian suddenly spoke up. It seems like some minor conflict has arisen among the subordinates. They aren't going to start fighting. Bian Junwu appeared unconcerned. Since it's a matter involving subordinates, let them handle it themselves. We have more important matters to discuss. Bian Junwu showed no intention of getting up. Zhang Yi thought to himself that Bian Junwu must be very confident in the abilities of his subordinates. Downstairs, Chen Jingwan was visibly agitated as he spoke. What's so great about River South Domain? I've served in the Navy before. If you're capable, fight me, but don't cry when you lose. Chen Jingwan had been holding back his frustration. Before the apocalypse, he came from a prominent family and had indeed joined the military, quickly rising through the ranks. After the apocalypse, he awakened his abilities, becoming the second in command at Morning Dew Base. A mere investigator from River South Domain was mocking him, which finally broke his composure. Wu Di and Kong Sheng watched Chen Jingwan's furious expression, their smiles growing wider. Wu Di jokingly said to Kong Sheng, look at this guy, he's getting desperate. Kong Sheng, with his arms crossed and a disdainful smile, what can a useless person do besides rage helplessly? But since he's challenged us, we can't act like cowards. They might think we're just like these country bumpkins, without any real substance. The two bantered back and forth, their words dripping with scorn for Chen Jingwan. In a fit of rage, Chen Jingwan blurted out, don't be too arrogant. We're all mutants here. Don't think you're so much better. Hearing this, Kong Sheng stepped forward a few paces and said, well then, let me show you what River South Domain mutants are capable of, and what kind of mutants you are from this little place. Kong Sheng's tone was full of contempt, but his eyes were deadly serious, showing no underestimation. Chen Jingwan felt a rush of satisfaction internally. His ability was rubber, and unless attacks exceeded his defensive limit, all physical forms of attack were ineffective against him. The strength required to surpass his limit was probably comparable to the blast of a cannon. Suddenly, Kong Sheng raised his hand in a freestyle fighting stance, and a blue glow surrounded him. His ability, Steel Forging, made his body as sturdy as steel during combat, significantly enhancing both his attack and defense capabilities. Uncle Yu, observing from the side, sensed something was amiss. This Kong Sheng is definitely stronger than me physically, but against this guy, he might be in for trouble. Last time during the Battle of the Five Armies, I almost got strangled by Chen Jingwan. If Flower hadn't intervened in time, I might have been killed. Liang Yu remarked, you can tell from his breathing and movements that Kong Sheng is also a skilled fighter. Although Chen Jingwan's ability was conducive to close combat, one-on-one fighting depended on the ability to adapt on the fly. Chen Jingwan gestured provocatively, come at me. Kong Sheng didn't hesitate. He burst forward with incredible speed. So fast, in fact, that some bystanders couldn't see clearly before he had already circled behind Chen Jingwan, and then he lashed out with a whip-like leg kick aimed fiercely at Chen Jingwan's back. He deliberately avoided aiming at his head, fearing a lethal blow. Chen Jingwan couldn't defend in time, and the kick landed solidly. But to Kong Sheng's astonishment, the kick felt like it hit nothing. Chen Jingwan's body twisted eerily like putty, even wrapping around his kicking leg. He didn't give Kong Sheng a chance to withdraw. In moments, like a giant python, he had Kong Sheng tightly bound. Kong Sheng tried to break free, but no matter how hard he exerted himself, Chen Jingwan instantly dissipated the force of his efforts, and with each struggle, Chen Jingwan tightened his grip. At that moment, Chen Jingwan laughed triumphantly. Not so tough now, are you? Seems River South Domain isn't all that. Better just give up. Just when Chen Jingwan thought he had the upper hand, Kong Sheng's palm suddenly transformed into a sharp blade, slashing fiercely towards Chen Jingwan's body. To his surprise, even this razor-sharp hand blade merely sliced through Chen Jingwan's clothes. Chen Jingwan, seeing this, burst into wild laughter and said, "I told you, my ability naturally counters your enhancement type. You might as well give up quietly, or else I might just strangle your bones." Kong Sheng was genuinely disgusted by this move, and those watching had largely concluded that the duel was decided. Uncle Yu, witnessing this scene, recalled being entangled by Chen Jingwan that day, thinking that it indeed turned out as he expected. But just then, Kong Sheng, tightly bound, suddenly turned his head sharply, and a sharp dagger spit out from his mouth, stabbing accurately into Chen Jingwan's left eye. With a splat, blood splattered instantly, and Chen Jingwan immediately clutched his eye and howled in pain. Under the intense pain, his binding force could no longer be maintained, and Kong Sheng took the opportunity to punch his way free. Freed, Kong Sheng immediately smirked, retrieving the spat-out dagger. It was then that the onlookers realized that the dagger was actually his tongue. Uncle Yu was incredulous. This guy had even enhanced his own tongue. The sudden turn in the fight surprised everyone present. Chen Jingwan, clutching his injured eye, said resentfully, "How did you discover my weakness?" Kong Sheng laughed loudly. "Isn't it obvious? Although you can turn your body into rubber, if your eyes did the same, wouldn't you become blind? Eyes can see because they receive light. If you altered the physical properties of your eyeballs, you wouldn't be able to see. The light would surely be distorted, affecting your vision. I deduced that your weakness must be your eyes. I figured this out in just 2 seconds. Do you admit defeat? You better get that bandaged soon, or you'll lose your life." Though Chen Jingwan was reluctant to accept it, he had lost. Indeed, if Kong Sheng hadn't held back, Chen Jingwan's head might have been pierced through. He could only return to his subordinates to quickly bandage the wound. After defeating Chen Jingwan, Kong Sheng still seemed eager for more challenges, shouting to those around him, "Does anyone else think they can defeat me? I'm up for some practice." The scene fell silent. Seeing no one step forward, he shrugged in disappointment and returned to his vehicle. Meanwhile, in the meeting room, everyone shared all the information they knew about the zombie and rat swarms. Aside from Zhang Yi, who kept some details secret, everyone was quite open. After all, eliminating the zombies was a shared interest. After exchanging information, Yan Junwu began issuing combat directives. The anticipation in the room was palpable. Given that River South Domain's intelligence capabilities were surely superior, everyone was curious about how much information they actually had. Yan Junwu adjusted his sunglasses and began methodically. "Based on your information, it seems that zombie swarms prefer to attack densely populated areas. The more people, the more active the zombies. The more zombies attracted, and since rats are merely associated with zombies, solving the zombie problem means the rats are not an issue." Everyone listened silently. Zhang Yi just said this, listening to a sermon indeed. After all the intel was shared, Yan Junwu pondered and said, "Looking at the behavior of the zombie swarms, it's almost certain there's a zombie king directing them. The zombie king might be a powerful zombie or a mutant capable of controlling zombies. Moreover, the numbers of the zombie swarm are enormous, capable of attacking all major forces simultaneously, meaning killing more zombies is almost futile. Only by eliminating the zombie king can we truly resolve the zombie crisis fundamentally. So, I request that all forces immediately retreat to underground shelters to avoid direct combat with the zombies, which would deplete our forces, and then secretly concentrate elite troops with the objective of eliminating the zombie king." Emerald Waterside has already abandoned the steel mill and retreated to an underground shelter. Morning Dew has given up the port and hidden on a giant ship. Only Radiant Prosperity is still concerned about their oil refinery being seized, still desperately fighting the zombies with oil. Now that we have River South Domain's endorsement for unified command, they can finally retreat safely. The zombies aren't interested in these resources. They're only interested in human flesh. Once the zombie tide is eliminated, these resources will still be theirs. Then Jingyixian frowned and said, "While retreating to underground shelters sounds good, our snow worship sect has no underground facilities, and all our followers have to sleep outdoors. We have a large population, and it's quite difficult to move them. What are we supposed to do? We don't have underground shelters, nor do we have a super strong shelter like Zhang Yi's." Saying this, Jingyixian stood up somewhat angrily and said, "Mr. Bian, I feel this plan is unfair to us." Bian Junwu, hearing this, fixed a sharp gaze on Jingyixian and coldly said, "Your snow worship sect currently has nearly 10,000 followers. Since you have taken them in, it is your responsibility to protect them. Do you really expect us to protect your disciples for you?" Jingyixian's face darkened, but before he could object, Bian Junwu continued, "Our district can only formulate tactics based on current conditions. If you all lack even this level of awareness, then everyone present will die. Bian Junwu's mission is to solve the zombie crisis and prevent it from affecting the surrounding cities. As for some people's life and death, he does not care." Jingyixian clenched his teeth in anger and said, "So you just want to watch us get eaten by zombies? If all other forces retreat underground, then the snow worship sect will surely become the biggest target for the zombie hordes. If that happens, all our followers will become a feast for the zombies. What's the point of me attending this meeting? Xiao Honglian said somewhat gleefully. You've taken in so many disciples. It's your responsibility to protect them. If you can't protect them, you shouldn't have recruited them in the first place. If it has come to this, it's your own fault. Jing Yixian glared at Xiao Honglian as if he wanted to devour her alive. Bian Junwo also spoke. I understand your difficulties, Mr. Zheng, but under the current circumstances, every force must save itself. Your snow worship sect could consider dispersing your followers to avoid the main direction of the zombie attacks. We will try to assist, but it's not possible to fully protect everyone. Snow worship sect also plays a crucial role in this tactical plan, but right now, that's still confidential. These words gave Jing Yixian a glimmer of hope. However, Bian Junwo gave him a cold look and said, everyone should go back now. I will give you an answer in 3 days. Any actions from now on must follow my command. People wanted to ask more, but Bian Junwo gestured mysteriously for the meeting to be adjourned. Reluctantly, the group stood up and left the meeting room. As Zhang Yi was about to leave the room, Bian Junwo called out to him. Zhang Yi was puzzled, wondering if he was already being called upon to act, but Bian Junwo asked, may I visit your shelter? Zhang Yi frowned, instinctively wanting to refuse, thinking that although Bian Junwo came from River South Domain, he was very cautious about anyone entering his shelter. Zhang Yi hesitated and said, it's just an ordinary villa, nothing compared to the major base's shelters. What would you see there? Hearing this, Bian Junwo said teasingly, you're not welcoming me? Zhang Yi quickly waved his hands. Not at all. Bian Junwo smirked and said, don't overthink it. I just want to see and chat. I'm not particularly interested in you, and we have no grievances between us. You don't need to be so guarded against me. Bian Junwo noticed his concern and then laughed. I just want to talk about how you eliminated the zombies. He leaned in close to Zhang Yi's ear and whispered, in exchange, I'll also share some information you don't know. This indeed tempted Zhang Yi. River South Domain's intelligence network was surely vast, and after so long in the post-apocalyptic world, Zhang Yi had come to deeply understand the importance of information, and since he was from River South Domain, it wouldn't do to sour relations completely. Thinking this, Zhang Yi smiled and nodded. Since you're so eager to visit my home, I can't turn you away. Bian Junwo walked out of the building with Zhang Yi, laughing and talking in a completely different manner from how he treated others. Just as Wei Dinghai stepped outside, he saw Chen Jingwan wrapped in bandages, his appearance somewhat comical. His expression changed slightly, and he couldn't help but angrily ask, who injured your eye? Chen Jingwan, still accountable, simply muttered, it's nothing serious, just a superficial wound. I was just sparring with some of the investigative team and accidentally got my eye injured. Bian Junwo glanced at Wu Di and Kong Sheng nearby and said, didn't I tell you to keep things peaceful? Wu Di, with a slightly sickly smile, replied, they started it. We just taught him a small lesson. Besides, we have to show our strength from time to time, or they'll think we're just dead weight. Bian Junwo, adjusting his sunglasses, said flatly, don't let it happen again. The two could only respond with a smile. Understood. As everyone was preparing to leave, someone suddenly shouted from the second-floor balcony, there's a horde of zombies approaching. He was Qi Guangming, the sniper of the investigative team. A massive swarm of zombies was seen furiously rushing towards them, easily numbering in the thousands. Xing Tian said gravely, it seems our gathering has attracted too much attention. These creatures can smell us from far away. As the zombies spotted the large group of living humans, their expressions grew even more frenzied. Xiao Honglian cursed, these disgusting creatures are really relentless. Wei Dinghai reminded Bian Junwo and the others, we must kill all these zombies today, or they'll take our information back to their king. It'll be even harder to deal with them next time. Hearing this, Bian Junwo calmly said, I see. He stepped forward, removing his sunglasses. People then noticed that his eyes were emitting a golden light. Bian Junwo moved to the front, and a brilliant gold gathered in his eyes. He spoke in a deep voice, exterminate. Suddenly, a dazzling white light enveloped everything in front of everyone. The intense light seemed to devour everything in its path, leaving only Bian Junwo's imposing figure visible. Zhang Yi, shielding his eyes from the light, squinted forward. The leaders of the major forces were shocked by this display, while the investigative team seemed accustomed to it. Everyone failed to notice that the zombies caught in the light seemed to melt away. After a long while, people were able to open their eyes again. The sight before them was unbelievable. Wei Dinghai, stunned, raised his hand and shouted, where did those zombies go? Looking in the direction, they saw that the zombies had been completely vaporized, leaving not even bones behind. Seeing this, Zhang Yi was dumbfounded, unable to believe his eyes. Had those thousands of zombies been annihilated in one strike? Such power was incomprehensible to Zhang Yi. He had never seen such terrifying strength in all his time in the post-apocalyptic world. He had seen many powerful mutants before, like Ling Feng, Xiao Honglian, and Wei Dinghai, whose strengths were still within the realm of understanding. But Bian Junwo's capabilities were beyond Zhang Yi's comprehension. Just a glance had turned thousands of zombies to dust, an unimaginable feat. Until now, Zhang Yi thought he was among the top of the mutant hierarchy, having absorbed the abilities of numerous formidable mutants. But today, Bian Junwo had taught him a lesson. At that moment, Wu Di jokingly said to Kong Sheng, the captain said to keep a low profile, yet he ended up stealing the show. Kongsheng replied, maybe the captain agreed with your idea. To get others to willingly follow your command, you first need to demonstrate your own powerful capabilities. After showing off like that, I doubt anyone will dare to disrespect our Captain Bien. Bien Junwo slowly put his glasses back on, but couldn't help coughing violently. The deputy leader, Bailey Chongqing, rushed over with concern. These small fries didn't need the captain's intervention. Bien Junwo cleared his throat and said, everyone is busy. There's no need to waste time here. Zhang Yi also noticed this scene and thought to himself that Bien Junwo must be suffering from some sort of health issue. Given River South Domain's medical facilities, common ailments would surely be treatable, so it's likely that his condition is either difficult to cure or related to his abilities. After a slight pause, Bien Junwo turned to everyone and said, everyone should go back now and prepare for the operation in 3 days. Remember to keep in touch, and when I contact you, you must comply with all my arrangements immediately. Bien Junwo stated sternly. Xiao Holian and the others nodded repeatedly in agreement. Having witnessed Bien Junwo's terrifying power, there was no longer any feeling of defiance in anyone's eyes, and even their speech became much softer. After everyone had left, Zhang Yi approached Bien Junwo and asked, Mr. Bien, it seems you are not feeling well. I have a doctor at home who is quite professional. Would you like to have a checkup? Bien Junwo declined, saying, it's nothing, just old issues, nothing serious. I'll be fine after some rest. Zhang Yi inwardly grimaced, thinking that if Bien Junwo was refusing even to see a doctor, it might indicate he had given up on treatment. Could it really be some incurable disease?